Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 727, and today is December 13th, 2024. I'm the host of the show, Kyle Anzalone. A lot of news here to wrap up the week. This is going to be a big one, so make sure you are subscribed to the show somewhere, and also, more importantly even, go subscribe to the brand new Kyle Anzalone show. The YouTube channel is up. The link is in the show notes page. Head on over and hit subscribe. Earlier this week on the Kyle Anzalone show, I did an episode breaking down what has happened in Syria, the U.S., the Israeli reaction, and what I think is likely to happen next. And honestly, I think it's maybe in the top 5 of any show that I've ever recorded. It is really good. I'm really happy with the finished product of that show. And I think all of my listeners will be as well. That is 700 plus episodes of this. I had previously done 600 plus episodes of the old foreign policy focus show. So this new show, but particularly that new episode, I think is a really, really good one. And if you haven't yet, please go on over and watch it. And then also share it out there. Let other people know about it as well. All right, let's start off the news on today's show with this one. Orban says Zelensky rejected proposal for Christmas truce. And of course, most years there's talks of a Christmas truce, and it's really trying to recapture the magic of the Christmas truce during the early World War I, when the men on the opposite sides of the trenches on Christmas left their trenches. They, shared food, they shared cigarettes, they played games of soccer in no man's land. And it was a really historic event for the point that you always have more in common with the man in the other trench than you actually do with your elected leaders. And it's or elected or appointed or whoever's the leader of your country, right? The elites of your country, the rulers, the ones that actually sent you to war, those are the people that are typically speaking your true enemies, or the person in the trench next to you, or not next to you, but across from you and next to you right now, your buddy, the guy across the trench, his buddies, right? Everybody's just concerned about getting back home, making sure family is fed and safe. And a lot of them are not on these ideological crusades to go, wage war and kill. They were forced there, and now they're forced to kill. And when that veil is lifted, when there no longer is this kill or be killed mentality like there was during that first Christmas day during World War I, then you can really have these magical moments where people leave their trenches, they go, they talk, they again share cigarettes. And I think something like this is really, particularly like that one, is really something that I'm sure raised a lot of red flags for the leaders of the people on both sides of the trenches there as well, realizing that they could be friends with the person in the cross a trench from them, but likely speaking, they'll never be friends with their own elected leaders. And so there were no more Christmas truces, and an end was put to that. And so, anyways, every year we now discuss a Christmas truce in a various conflict, and usually they don't materialize. This year it seems to be the same. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban said Wednesday that he had proposed the idea of Ukraine and Russia establishing a Christmas truce, but it was rejected by Ukrainian President Zelensky. So the Hungarian leader said, at the end of the Hungarian EU presidency, we make efforts for peace. We proposed a Christmas ceasefire and large-scale prisoner exchange. It is said that President Zelensky clearly rejected and ruled this out today. We did what we could. Orban didn't specify how the proposal was presented or how the Russian side responded. His post on X was a response to Zelensky apparently taking a shot at the Hungarian leader for speaking with Russian President Vladimir Putin earlier in the day. Zelensky wrote on X, "We hope that Orban at least won't call Assad in Moscow to listen to an hour-long lecture as well. There can be no discussions about the war that Russia wages against Ukraine without Ukraine." And this is, I think, really insanity from Zelensky's part. The Ukrainians are losing right now. They need manpower. And certainly a 2-week ceasefire on the front lines, would benefit the side that the momentum is against, right? I think Russia has the momentum. They're taking territory from the Ukrainians. A 2-week ceasefire is going to allow Ukrainians' frontline men who are being beaten over and over and over again to, establish some positions for a couple weeks, maybe dig in a little bit more, maybe train up some new people and get them to the front lines for reinforcements, plug the holes that deserters are fleeing out of. Like, these are things that could be accomplished militarily, tactically, that would be good for the Ukrainian side if Zelensky agreed to the ceasefire. Now, maybe the concern from Zelensky is either once his men or once his side stop fighting, then he feels like the fight is just going to freeze there. And so any ceasefire risks freezing the lines of conflict there. And Zelensky, of course, thinks that he is going to take more of Ukraine's territory back, which is just completely absurd. And I think this would be a good thing for Ukraine if they could freeze the front lines where they are, because Russia is just going to take more territory. So, in Orban's statement on his call with Putin, he said Hungary is taking every diplomatic step to argue in favor of peace and ceasefire and peace talks. The Kremlin said that during the call, Putin blamed Ukraine for the lack of diplomatic solutions to the war, and Orban has been one of the few NATO leaders who has maintained contact with Putin. So, this should obviously be seen as a good thing. Typically, this gets Putin or Orban, smeared as a Putin puppet and somebody who's not to be trusted. And unfortunately, the Hungarians had the rotating European Union presidency for the past year, which I think was an opportunity to, use that seat, Orban being in the EU presidency seat, to help to facilitate an agreement here, and now his stay is up. All right, next up here, this one, Dave DeCamp, antiwar.com. Trump says he vehemently disagrees with U.S.-backed long-range missile strikes on Ukraine. So President-elect Donald Trump has said that he vehemently disagrees with the U.S. supporting long-range missile strikes inside Russian territory, which President Biden authorized last month. Trump said in an interview with Time magazine for an issue that named him Person of the Year, "I disagree very vehemently with this sending missiles hundreds of miles into Russia. Why are we doing that? We're just escalating this war and making it worse. That should not have been allowed to have been done." Biden took the step to support Ukraine's strikes on Russia using U.S. ATACMS and British Storm Shadow missiles, even after Moscow made it clear it would risk nuclear escalation. Russia responded to the Ukraine's initial ATACMS and Storm Shadow strikes by firing a new hypersonic intermediate-range missile known as the Oreshnik. Ukrainian forces fired more ATACMS into Russia this week, and the Russian Defense Ministry is vowing a response. Trump campaigned on ending the proxy war in Ukraine, but has not articulated how he plans to do that. He was asked in Time interview if he would abandon Ukraine, and he responded, "I want to reach an agreement, and the way you're going to reach an agreement is not to abandon. You understand what I mean, right?" The president-elect stressed in the interview that he was concerned with the death toll in Ukraine in the conflict, saying it was much higher than has been reported. He said the numbers of dead young soldiers lying on the fields all over the place are staggering. It's crazy what's taking place. Now, one more thing to mention here is that Trump has appointed Mike Waltz, or, made Mike Waltz his national security advisor, and is preparing to appoint Keith Kellogg as his envoy to the Ukraine conflict. Now, both of these men have endorsed the Biden administration using the long-range strikes inside of Russian territory. And in fact, when Mike Waltz said it, he made it really sound like the Trump administration had at least communicated with the White House on the issue, and as he said, was hand in glove with the current policy. So this could be a lie, that could be a lie, both could be truthful statements that Waltz believes it and Trump doesn't. It really won't be until Trump sits in the White House that we understand how his administration is going to play out. If he's willing to stand up to the Hawks in his circle this time, or they'll just dominate him once again, which I think is the most likely outcome here. All right, next up, France, Poland discuss sending troops to monitor future Ukraine ceasefire. So on Thursday, French President Macron and Polish Prime Minister Tusk discussed the idea of sending troops to Ukraine if a ceasefire is reached, an idea reportedly favored by President-elect Donald Trump. Trump said that the idea of sending troops to Ukraine was discussed, and Warsaw is not planning any such actions, at least for the moment. A report in a Polish newspaper claimed that France and Poland had been discussing the idea of establishing an international peacekeeping force comprised of 40,000 troops from around the world. However, a Polish official told Politico that Warsaw was surprised by the reported plan and said that any peacekeeping force should be under the UN or the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. According to the Wall Street Journal, Trump told Macron and Ukrainian President Zelensky that he wanted European troops in Ukraine to monitor any potential future ceasefire deal. The president-elect also told them that he opposes Ukrainian entry into NATO, but wants to see a strong and well-armed Ukraine. Any NATO deployment of troops to Ukraine would likely be a non-starter for Moscow, since one of the Russian primary motives for launching the war in Ukraine was over Ukraine's alignment with the Western military alliance and its potential future membership. Zelensky has previously suggested that he could temporarily cede territory to Russia if he gets security guarantees for Russia from NATO, another idea that Russia will reject. All right, and just if all the news on Russia today wasn't stupid enough, we had the new NATO secretary, it's not Jens Stoltenberg anymore, it's Mark Rutte, who's making some really insane comments. On Thursday, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte called for the alliance to significantly increase military spending up to Cold War levels and adopt a wartime mindset. He said, "It is true that we spend more on defense now than we did a decade ago, but we are still spending far less than during the Cold War, even though the threats to our freedom and security are just as big, if not bigger. During the Cold War, Europeans spent more than 3% of their GDP on defense," Rutte said. So he is a former Dutch prime minister and suggested Europe should increase military spending by making cuts from pensions and health services. He said, "I know spending more on defense means spending less on other priorities, but it is only a little less. On average, European countries spend up to a quarter of their national income on pensions, health, and social security systems. We need a small fraction of that money to make our defenses much stronger and to preserve our way of life." Rutte said that Europeans should tell their banks and pension funds it is simply unacceptable that they refuse to invest in the defense industry. Defense is not in the same category as illicit drugs and pornography. The NATO chief framed his demand for an increase in military spending as a way to prevent a war and claimed that Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea are hard at work to try to weaken North America and Europe. Rutte, who replaced Jens Stoltenberg as head of NATO in October, is also determined to continue the proxy war in Ukraine, saying there should be less of a talk of peace and more focus on shipping weapons into the conflict. And this to me reads like more Trump-proofing of the war in Ukraine. The whole point of putting Rutte in this position was he was going to help the Trump-proofing of the war in Ukraine by helping to prevent Trump from exiting. So two things that could do that are ramping up the European spending in NATO, their defense spending, and saying things like we're going to invest more in the defense industry are really, I think, going to appeal to Donald Trump. All right, this one from December 10th at antiwar.com. Taiwan says it's tracking Chinese warships after Taiwanese president visited the U.S. So Taiwan said on Tuesday that mainland China had deployed a large number of warships and planes around the island following Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te's visit to the U.S. According to the South China Morning Post, Taiwan has monitored the most significant Chinese military activity in the area since China conducted a blockade drill around the island last October, which was a response from a speech that was given by Lai. Taiwanese officials also said that China had deployed a total of 90 naval and Coast Guard vessels stretching from the South China Sea to the southern Japanese islands. The deployment is seen as an effort by China to show that it could potentially blockade not only Taiwan, but also impede U.S. and its allies in the region from interfering in any potential conflict. China typically announces when it conducts major military drills, but has been so far silent on the current activity. When asked about it during a press briefing on Tuesday if China was conducting military exercises around Taiwan, the Taiwanese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Mao Ning said that I refer you to the Chinese authorities for the specific question. What I can tell you is that the Taiwan question is China's internal affair, and China will firmly defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity. And so this is certainly one last Biden escalation in the Asia Pacific before he finally shuffles his way on out of the White House. Next up, this one is horrific. Air Wars finds Israel killed over 5,000 civilians in Gaza in October of 2023. So the monitoring group Air Wars released a new report on Thursday that found that Israeli forces killed a minimum of 5,139 civilians during the first 25 days of its bombing campaign in Gaza, starting on October 7, 2023. Air Wars examined 606 incidents of civilian harm and found that only 32 to 60 militants were killed in those same strikes. Using the higher estimate of 60 militants' deaths, the ratio of civilians to combatants killed in the incident is about 85 to 1. Lowering it to 32 brings the ratio to about 160 to 1. Air Wars said the scale of civilian harm was incomparable to any other 21st century conflict, and that the number of civilians killed in the first 25 days of the war was nearly 4 times more civilians reported killed in any single month than any conflict Air Wars has documented since it was established in 2014. The report details the huge number of children killed in Gaza during the first 25 days of the war. Air Wars recorded a minimum 190 children killed by Israeli military action in Gaza. This is nearly 7 times higher than the most deadly month for children previously recorded by Air Wars. And again, several times higher than the number of militants killed. Air Wars recorded a minimum number of 1,213 women killed in the 106 incidents reviewed. Women and children were mainly killed in residential buildings in strikes that often slaughtered many members of the same family. So the report says families were killed together in unprecedented numbers and in their homes. More than 9 out of 10 women and children were killed in residential buildings. In more than 95% of all cases where women was killed, at least one child was also killed. The report said that Air Wars assumes each person killed is a civilian unless there is evidence to the contrary. The report reads, using publicly available information, Air Wars makes every effort to investigate connections between the individuals killed and the militant groups. Evidence includes any suggestion in local sources that directly associate individuals and participants in hostilities with membership in a militant group. Air Wars says it does not capture incidents where militias are killed and there is no evidence of civilian harm. The group stresses that the report that the 5,139 civilians recorded killed is a minimum number based on the 606 incidents. Air Wars is also assessing incidents that caused civilian harm during that 25-day period. Air Wars explains, this report considers the most conservative estimates or the lowest possible estimates. Upper estimates of civilian harm are included in each incident published on Air Wars' fully public archive. Air Wars reported aligns with a November 2023 report from 972 magazine, an Israeli publication that revealed that the Israeli military was intentionally bombing civilian targets, including high-rise residential buildings, public buildings, and infrastructure, which it labeled as power targets. The 972 report explained that the purpose of the bombing of power targets was mainly to harm civilian society, to create shock that, among other things, will reverberate powerfully and lead civilians to put pressure on Hamas. Israeli sources said that the Israeli military was generally aware of how many civilians would be killed in a particular strike, and they launched the attack to kill one Hamas militant, knowing hundreds of civilians would be killed. Nothing happens by accident, a source told 972. When a 3-year-old girl is killed at a home in Gaza, it's because someone in the army decided it wasn't a big deal for her to be killed. That is, it was a price worth paying in order to hit another target. We are not Hamas. These are not random rockets. Everything is intentional. We know exactly how much collateral damage there is in every home. Earlier this year, another report from 972 revealed how the Israeli military was using AI to track Hamas militants and create targets, which makes errors and can falsely label people as militants who are not. One system called Where's Daddy was used to track Hamas members to bomb them when they were in their homes with their families. In one incident, the Israeli military authorized the killing of 300 civilians to kill what they hoped would be one Hamas commander. The Biden administration has continued to provide weapons and political support for Israel's genocidal war in Gaza, despite the overwhelming evidence of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Israeli officials have admitted that without U.S. support, the Israeli military couldn't sustain operations in Gaza for more than a few months. And let's look at the most recent Israeli operations in Gaza. Israeli strikes killed dozens more in Gaza, including an orthopedic surgeon. This from December 12th. Israeli strikes across the Gaza Strip killed dozens more Palestinians on Thursday, including an orthopedic surgeon in northern Gaza who was traveling between hospitals. This is the same way, by the way, that Ramsey Baroud, one of our columnists at antiwar.com, his sister, who was also a doctor, was traveling between hospitals and was killed in southern Gaza. So Gaza's health ministry said a quadcopter drone shot and killed Dr. Shahid Joda while he was traveling from Kamal Adwan Hospital to the Al-Adwa Hospital in Jabalia. Both northern Gaza cities have been under a total Israeli siege since early October as a part of an ethnic cleansing campaign. Dr. Joda was believed to be the last orthopedic surgeon in northern Gaza and was injured in a previous strike but continued to work. The health ministry said that his killing brought the total number of medical staff in Gaza killed by Israel since October 2023 to 1,057. We call on all workers in the healthcare system in all countries of the world to stand in solidarity with our healthcare teams in the Gaza Strip, with where the sector is being subject to genocide, the ministry said. On Thursday evening, Israeli strikes pounded the Nusra refugee camp in central Gaza, targeting several homes. At least 33 people were killed in the attacks, including children. Medical sources told Al Jazeera that at least 71 Palestinians were killed in strikes across the Gaza Strip on Thursday. Earlier in the day, the health ministry released its daily death toll update, saying 30 Palestinians were killed and 99 were wounded in the previous 24-hour period, and those only count the people who are brought to the hospitals are the morgues. The ministry said that based on numbers, the death toll since October of 2023 was now 44,835, and the number of wounded 106,356, and of course that is a massive undercount. Even with all the slaughter going on in Gaza, Netanyahu has bigger ambitions. So Netanyahu tells Iranian people that regime change will come a lot sooner than people think. So the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu issued a fresh threat to carry out regime change in Iran. The Israeli leader said Tel Aviv had scored a recent series of victories over Tehran. In an English-speaking address to the people of Iran, he slammed Tehran for subjugating the Iranian people and promised, "One day you will be free," adding he planned to transform the Middle East. Netanyahu went on to suggest that Tel Aviv will play a role in ousting the Iranian government. He said, "And I have no doubt that we will realize that future together a lot sooner than people think." The Israeli leader issued a similar address to the people of Iran, also in English, on September 30th, where he said, when Iran is finally free, and that moment will come a lot sooner than people think, everything will be different. Our two ancient peoples, the Jewish people and the Persian people, will finally be at peace. Our two countries, Israel and Iran, will be at peace. Shortly after the address, Netanyahu significantly ramped up his massive bombing campaign of Lebanon and began the final stages of an ethnic cleansing campaign in northern Gaza. In the video address posted on X on Wednesday, Netanyahu claimed great victories over Hezbollah and Hezbollah. He said, "The historic events we witnessed today are a chain reaction to the pounding of Hamas, the decimation of Hezbollah, the targeting of Nasrallah." He referred to those events as blows to Iran's axis of terror. Netanyahu also referenced the president-elect Donald Trump crediting of Israel's fighting success for bringing down the Syrian government. Since October 7th attack, Israel has been on a rampage, conducting major military operations in Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen. And so who knows if that the next on the list is Iran. It's certainly concerning. Now, especially with this article here from Dave DeCamp that he wrote yesterday as well, I think it's a pretty good companion article to the one I wrote, which is report Israel sees opportunity to bomb Iran after downfall of Assad. So the Israeli military believes there is now an opportunity to bomb Iran due to the weakness of its allies in the region, the ousting of former Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, the Times of Israel reported on Thursday. Israeli military officials said in the wake of the regime change in Syria, the Israeli Air Force has increased its preparations for a potential attack on Iran. The Times report said that the IDF is considering launching strikes on Iran's nuclear program, while Israeli officials are consistently claiming Iran is seeking a nuclear weapon. There's no evidence that that is in fact the case, a fact recently acknowledged by the CIA. In the wake of Assad's ouster, Israel launched a massive bombing campaign on Syria, hitting Syria 480 times in just 48 hours. The Israeli military said it decimated the former government's military assets, destroying about 80% of what was left behind. Israeli officials now say they have total air superiority over Syria due to the lack of air defenses, which can make it much easier to launch strikes on Iran. Israeli warplanes have had to avoid air defenses when bombing Syria, but now Israeli officials say they're able to fly over Damascus without having to worry about getting shot down by Russian-made air defenses. Israel last bombed Iran in October, attacks that damaged some air defenses and killed 4 Iranian soldiers and 1 civilian. Iran vowed a response to the attack, but nothing has happened so far. Israel launched the strikes on Iran in response to an Iranian ballistic missile attack on Israel that was retaliation for the Israeli escalations in the region, including assassinations that occurred in Tehran and the assassination of Nasrallah in Lebanon. All right, let's wrap up the show today with this one. Yemen's Houthis attack U.S. destroyer and merchant ships in Gulf of Aden. So on Tuesday, U.S. Central Command said 2 Navy destroyers and 3 U.S. commercial ships came under attack launched by Yemen's Houthis while transiting the Gulf of Aden. The Houthis, officially known as Ansar Allah, took credit for the attack, saying they targeted 2 U.S. destroyers that were accompanying supply ships. Houthi military spokesperson Yasha Sarah said the attack achieved its objectives, while CENTCOM said the attack was defeated. CENTCOM said the destroyers intercepted multiple drones and 1 cruise missile. The reckless attacks resulted in no injuries and no damage on any vessels, civilians, or U.S. naval, the command said. The Houthis launched similar attacks about 10 days ago. So this is just going to continue in the Gulf of Aden, the Red Sea, until Israel finally stops what it's doing in Gaza, and who knows when that is going to be. All right, everybody, that's where I'm wrapping up the show for the week. Thank you all so much for all of your support, not only here at Conflicts of Interest, but over at the Kyle Anzalone Show. And everything it is going really well, and I appreciate your support. Thank you so much.